Hey, you guys, today for reading workshop, we are going to focus really on unfolding characters while unfolding history. Um, Understanding the timeline of history and understanding the timeline of a character while history is happening is really important to comprehend in your book. Not only that, but those things are going to allow you to have deeper discussions to make your book clubs even better. So, with that being said, let's get started today. Hey, you guys, today for Reading Workshop, we are going to work on unfolding characters while unfolding history. Basically, we're going to be looking at the timelines of how things happen in a book with not only the timelines of history, but the timelines of a character. So with that, let's get started for Reading Workshop. So let's check out today's teaching point. You can see that readers of historical fiction consider both the big historical timeline of things as well as the smaller individual timelines of characters' lives that occur alongside these. That basically says that what we're going to be doing is looking at the timeline of history in a book and the timeline of the character in the same book. Let's pretend for a minute that we were making up a personal timeline, and this was my own personal timeline of my life. I'm going to tell you right now, this is not. I'm not this old. But I chose this because in history there were some really cool events that had taken place in the early 50s through the late 60s. So that's why I chose this. But let's take a look at it. Born in 1951 in Boston, Massachusetts. I say Boston because that's how they talk in Boston. In 1960, moved to a farm in western New York. In 1961, started middle school. Don Graves was my minister. In 1961 through 1965, Painful Middle School, began tutoring and reading. Don't you find that to be a funny name for a middle school? Painful. Where are you guys going to go to school next year? Painful. It's awesome. I got to go teach there. And then from 1965 through 1969 was high school. So what I see here is this is a timeline of events that have happened, in this person's life. In 1951, where they were born. 1960, where they moved to. 61, where they went to middle school. 1961 through 65 was their life in middle school. And then 65 through 69 was high school tutoring. Now, this is just a logical order timeline. I can also create another timeline that would go right next to it. Parallel timelines of my personal life and then one of historical events that happened during that same time. Let me show you what that looks like. So you guys, what I have here is I have the parallel timelines. You can see that on one side, this is the same personal timeline that I had on the previous page. And now on this side is the historical timeline. You notice that the dates are the same, right? But along each event of my personal timeline, I also listed a historical event as well. Okay? So you can see that, it flows together. That I have events that happened in history in between 1965 and 1969. You can see that I have in 1968 this happened, and in 1969 something else happened. So you can put in time events over an extended period of time. But let's take a look at this because I find some of them to be fascinating. In 1951, I was born. In 1951, the color TV was introduced in the United States. Mind blown, right? The color TV was invented when this person was born. Sputnik, that was the first satellite that went up into outer space. Now, that was the first one. Now we have tens of thousands of these satellites that are out there, and they actually, when astronauts go out in outer space, they can actually run into them. They have to be really careful. It's scary. The Berlin Wall was actually put up. You guys don't even know about that because it was torn down in the 80s before you were born. In 1960, the greatest rock band ever, the Beatles, were formed. In 1961, John F. Kennedy was inaugurated. He became president. I mean, so amazing things happened. In 1963, the March on Washington. and John F. Kennedy was assassinated. In 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated. In 1969, Neil Armstrong walks on the moon. So I chose this timeline because this person in their early life had some amazing events happen. So this shows you that you can actually have a personal timeline and a historical timeline. Think about your books. You can have a timeline of a personal timeline of your character and then a historic timeline of things that happened in history going side by side. So you can see what kind of historic events are happening to your character in your book. That's why we're reading historical fiction. Let's take a look at a sample of one. So this is To Number the Stars, book that I am reading. And this is a timeline that you can see here. This is the historical events that happened, and then the character's personal timeline. So if I take a look at it, according to the book, 3 years ago, German soldiers occupied the city of Copenhagen, right? And there was nothing personal that happened at that point to the character, so I left it blank. And then here, some Danish people work as the resistance. Those were people that were fighting against the Germans. They called them the resistance, to bring harm to the Nazis however they can. They actually used like guerrilla warfare. They would do anything they can to cause problems. What happened at that same time personally? Well, Anne-Marie and Ellen run into German soldiers on the corner, and Christy does too, but is unconcerned. She doesn't really care. And then what else happened during the same time? Well, here I can see that Ellen's mother stops having coffee with Anne-Marie's mother and retreats worried to her apartment when she hears the girls about the girls' encounter. So this is a timeline based on the novel, and I am writing about the historical events that are happening in the novel, and then I'm looking at the characters and I'm looking at what is also happening to them at the same time and just creating a simple timeline. It can go side by side, or it could be just another timeline that you want to create. So what does that all really mean for you? Well, here's what I would like you to do. I want you guys to work on creating a timeline in your books when you are with your book clubs. This is going to be something that you're going to do together, so you can discuss it together, so you can all look at the book, you can find those historical events, and you can find the events that are happening to the character personally during that same time. And I really feel that the collaboration is going to be helpful to you. So what you will be doing is you will be working on this timeline, again, with your groups. I will give you time to be able to go ahead and do that. But understanding those historical events and relating them and connecting them back to the character when it's happening at the same time is going to give you a deeper understanding of your book and more items to discuss in your book clubs, which is ultimately the goal. So good luck.